It is now time to jump into the little project that we have in this series for Python. And what this is going to be is this is going to be creating a Flask API. Now, if you're not familiar with APIs, I would definitely recommend doing a little bit of research, but I'm going to give you the 30-second overview almost of what an API is. So let's say you have some code here and it needs to get to Azure. Well, for this code to get to Azure, it needs some sort of maybe authentication method, or it needs some sort of path to get to Azure. Well, what you would do is you would take this code and you would maybe do AZ-CLI or something, or you would do, maybe Python, and you would use some Azure SDKs, and those SDKs, say in AZ-CLI or in the Azure library in Python, make calls to Azure based on authentication methods. And those calls, now I should back up and say that there are different types of APIs. We will see like a web API in this video, but essentially what an API is it has some code and it's making some call somewhere. Now that could be your local host, that could be up into Azure, that could be in AWS, for example, GCP, anywhere. But essentially that API, it's a call to do something somewhere. Let's go ahead and look at APIs in Flask. Now Flask is an API framework. The first thing that we're going to have to do is make sure that Flask actually exists in PyCharm. So we're going to go to our project, and then we're going to go to the interpreter, and we'll see if Flask currently exists, and it looks like it does not. So we're going to go to the plus button, we're going to type in Flask. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to install that package in PyCharm. And then once this package is installed, we're able to use the framework. We're going to close out of this. We're going to click OK. And then we're going to say from Flask, so from the library or from the SDK, import Flask. And that's going to be the class that we're importing. And then we need a variable that's going to essentially initialize that application. So to be able to do that, there's a few different ways. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to essentially just say Python app equals Flask name. And what this is going to do is this is going to initialize Flask. And then every time that we run it, it'll know, yep, we're using the Flask API. And then we're going to do a few enters here. And what we're going to do is we're going to start creating our routes. So, when you go to a website and you go to slash whatever, that's a route. And that's exactly what we're going to create here. We're going to create that route. Let's go ahead and do @Python app. Now, we didn't go over what @something means, but essentially it's a decorator, and a decorator has multiple functions or methods or variables or different values inside of it. So essentially it's, instead of creating 10 lines of code to do this, we only have this one because it's wrapped in this decorator that it gets from this variable. And then we'll do route. And route is one of the methods that exist inside of this decorator. And then what we can do is we can do colon, and then we can do slash. And what slash is that's the root of the API. That's the root of the web UI that we're going to be able to get to. And then under here, we're going to, oops, sorry, no colon there. And then under here, what we're going to do is we're going to specify a method. And this method could be hello Python learners. And we'll go ahead and we'll close that, and we'll have to return something, and that return is going to be what we're returning to the screen. And we'll say hello Python learners. So really, this is actually in 7 lines of code in API. You have just literally created an API. Now, this is obviously a small API, but you definitely have created that API here. now we have to specify how we're running this API. How do we make it go? What we can do is we could do Python app dot run. And if I just go back here, you're going to see there are a bunch of different methods in here. Of course, we can't cover them all. So I do definitely recommend a little bit of research, a little bit of playing around with this, but we are covering the main ones. What we're going to do is we're going to do run. And then this run method is going to have two parameters that we want to pass in. Host, aka where we're running it from. We're going to do 127.0.0.0.0.1, aka local host. And then we want to specify the port. So the port is going to be where we want our Python application or our Python API to run from. What we can do is we can do port 5000 here, and then we would ultimately be able to run our application. And then I'm actually just going to put this IP address in strings. Now, the one thing that I do want to point out, because this catches a lot of people, if you decide to run this web app or any web app inside of Azure, AWS, or something, make sure that you change this host. And to play it safe, you want to change that host to 0.0.0.0. And the reason why is because Azure, AWS, all the other cloud services, they're going to do some networking on the back end, and they're going to give those web apps their own IP addresses. And because of that, we want to make sure that the Python web app or the Flask API runs anywhere, and that 0.0.0.0 is exactly how we do it. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to save this. We'll save it to, here's the path here. We'll make sure that we copy this path, and then we'll save it as app.py. Okay, and now let's go ahead and open up a terminal. And then we're going to bring this terminal over to the screen, and we're going to do cd to this path. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to actually run the application. So we'll do Python app.py. And as we can see, the application is officially running here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this. I'm going to open up web browser here, bring this over, and then enter, and boom, we can see here's our return value, and then we can see the logs here that we did do a get. Let's go back to a PyCharm really quick, and what I want to do is I'm going to do another route. I'm going to do at Python app route, and now this time we're going to do /learners, f learners, if I can spell correctly. And then we're going to return, this is the learner page. Okay, we're going to save this, make sure we save all. We're going to go back to the terminal, we're going to close out of our app, clear our screen, and we're going to do this again. So we're now running our application, and what we want to do is we want to go to the learners route. Let's open up our API again, okay? And then we'll type in learner. So /learners, this is the route that we're getting to. And then we can see this is the learner page. So that /learners is what the route is. This is the home page. So obviously when we just opened up the Flask API for the first time, we saw it returned hello Python learners. But the second that we went to another route, it returns something else. And you can have as many routes as you want. And this is how, there's a whole bunch of different frameworks, and a lot of people use different languages like JavaScript and stuff. But when you go to that /something and it returns a page, like a login page, for example, this is how it's done. I really hope that you enjoyed this whole Python journey with me. I know it was short, but I hope that it definitely gives you a little bit more in-depth knowledge of Python, and it gets you started to be able to get out there and jump into some learning. Now, if you're interested in more learning, we do have a ton of really, really great Python courses right at CBC Nuggets. So if you're interested, let me know and let's chat about it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and take care.